Redditors, what is the weirdest thing you have heard of someone not believing in? Meerkats. My father, a man of 50 plus years, did not believe meerkats were real. Rather, meerkats were invented by Disney in 1994. Even after we had a reality TV show called Meerkat Manor that followed the lives of a meerkat family, he was doubtful. It wasn't until I took him to the Meerkat Cafe at the zoo that he lost his crap and laughed hysterically at all the little diamonds. That is actually a really cute ending to the story. I've encountered a guy who was extremely convinced that humans hadn't landed on the moon, not for any of the usual reasons, but because he thinks anything originating on Earth ceases to exist if it leaves the atmosphere. He thinks Earth matter detonates its vibrations or something and simply blinks out of existence. He doesn't believe in the moon landings, the ISS, or satellites. In elementary school I had a classmate that didn't believe in sharks. He thought they were just a scary thing grown-ups made up to get out of taking their kids to the beach. A friend of mine did not think that there was any such thing as a random number generator in video games, particularly MMOs. He honestly thought that every time the item he wanted didn't drop, it was because some employee at Blizzard or whatever was watching him do the battle and deciding which item would show up. When he was running for president, my grandmother was convinced that Barack Obama wasn't half white, so I showed her pictures of his white mother. Nope, still not convinced. Grandma, if she's so white, how come we never see her? Emmy. Grandma, she's dead. Grandma, well, isn't that convenient? Oh, Grandma. I had a professor tell the class about a student he had once. He had mentioned France in a lecture and a girl raised her hand and asked, "Why are you talking about France as if it's real?" When the professor asked her what the frick she was talking about, she explained that France is just a myth. Her reasoning was that she had never been there before and had no proof that it actually existed. I bet Peekaboo still works on her. Ants. No matter how much proof we showed her, my dumbass cousin was convinced there were spiders. She had to have been 15 at the time. Okay, what the frick? A girl at university thought owls were mythical creatures because they are in Harry Potter. She was genuinely shocked, amazed when we showed her that they did exist. I've met people who thought reindeer were fictional just because Santa uses them. I have an ex who didn't believe in math, and she had proof. Her reasoning was that two negative numbers multiplying to give a positive number didn't make any sense. Wait, now the saying two wrongs don't make a right makes no sense to me since two negatives do make a positive. Damn it, Grandma. My intro geology professor didn't believe in plate tectonics. He thought earthquakes were caused by methane farts released from the crust. My cousin's ex-GF didn't believe Alaska was a part of the US because it wasn't physically touching the country. They were in high school and couldn't convince her otherwise. That same cousin also argued with me about what countries make up the continent of Asia. He thought China was the only Asian country. I am half Japanese and tried to explain that I am considered half Asian, but he didn't believe me. I guess they were kind of meant to be. My intro geology professor didn't believe in plate tectonics. Please tell me he got fired from his job. Little late to the game, but here's one from my sister. About a year ago, she's 21. She and I along with my parents were riding in the car and she looks at the crescent moon and says it's so weird how the moon does that, and we ask her to explain. She went on to explain how she still couldn't wrap her head around how the moon's light could just stop shining like that. That was the day we had to explain that the moon was just a rock and not emitting its own light to a 20-year-old college student who just got accepted to law school. My ex-girlfriend didn't know what the Grand Canyon was, and after I described it to her and showed pictures, she was convinced I was trying to trick her. She was 17 at the time. PLZ tell me grew up in Angola or Nepal or somewhere far as frick from the Grand Canyon. My ex was totally and completely invested in the idea that if a girl is on top, she can't get pregnant. I was 15 at the time and she was having sex with me, so I went along with it. I still wore a condom because I wasn't an idiot, but she refused to do any other position in fear of getting pregnant. Gravity bruh. My friend met this girl in college who thought that the US was the only country with electricity and modern technology. My mum saw a cartoon meerkat on the television and said, "Look at that stupid thing." As if something like that is real. No matter how much we tried to convince her, she didn't buy it. My otherwise very smart mother believes mental illness is just people being too whiny and sensitive and that they don't actually exist. It's hard to accept until you experience or live with someone that experiences mental illness. I had a roommate in college who was pro-pharmacy that didn't believe in modern medicine. He believed everything was the placebo effect and that it was all a money-making scam and he wanted in on it. Bonus crazy. He thought prior to the Industrial Revolution people could live for hundreds of years, like Methuselah, whom he thought was real. Just after the advent of things like factories, processed food, medicine, etc., people lost the ability to survive that long due to weakened immune systems. Well, this one is pretty easily solved if you're willing to lie. Give him an Advil PM or a Xanax or something and tell him it's a caffeine pill. A friend of mine didn't believe me when I told her that animals don't understand the human language. Like, she believed that her cat understood everything she said. When I told her that this isn't the case, she asked me if it's because the cat is from a different country and only speaks that country's language. What? She still doesn't believe me. Please tell me your friend is 6 years old. Apparently the sun isn't a star, semantically speaking. He then went into his technical definition of a star, and at the end I just stared at him. Snow tires are a myth by tire companies to get you to buy 2 sets, and summer tires are fine on most any vehicle during the winter. Also, laughably wrong. And if you're going to believe this, give me some peace of mind and at least run all seasons. Still not good, but Jesus. I was dating this 24-year-old chick who was convinced that cigarette smoking did not increase your chances of developing lung cancer. She said, if smoking causes lung cancer, how come some babies are born with it? While we are having this conversation, her underdeveloped toddler is coughing her little lungs out in a room full of smoke. She was special. One day in middle school, in science class while studying the light spectrum, I saw a friend sitting in the corner looking completely zoned out and seemingly angry. After approaching him and asking what the problem was, he looks at me and says, "I am a Christian. I do not believe in the light spectrum." What? Let there be light is the very first thing that God says in the Bible. I had a friend who didn't believe in outer space. She said the stars were lights in the sky made by God, and that scientists had made up space as part of a conspiracy to get funding. Not sure what they supposedly did with it. Sometimes we would get drunk at parties and make her explain her belief system while everyone laughed. In hindsight, that wasn't very nice. One of my classmates didn't know that dinosaurs were real. Another one didn't think that the seasons are the opposite in the different hemispheres. Gays. The boyfriend of a woman I worked with was second-generation Portuguese Australian and only voluntarily associated with people from that community. However, he decided to tag along to an after-work function where he tried to pick a fight with a very odd gay colleague who was getting too cozy with her. She explained it as he doesn't believe in poofs. Oh boy, do I have some doozies for you. My ex-wife. Let's list them, shall we? 1. She did not believe there was a first Gulf War. So when we went to war now and hear the complaints of George W. trying to finish his father's war, she didn't know what it meant, and when I explained it to her she refused to believe it. You'll see this is a pattern. 2. She did not believe that thunder came after the lightning strike. She refused to believe it. Again, evidence would not dissuade her. 3. She would not believe that in the winter months the days are shorter. Nope, she actually thought and would argue that in the winter the sun comes up earlier and stays out later. She could never prove this to me, of course. 4. And finally, my personal favorite. She did not believe that freaking nuclear weapons existed. She absolutely did not believe it. So one day I asked her, what was it you thought ended the Pacific War in World War II? What did we drop on Hiroshima? Her response, it was just made up to scare other countries. Yeah, needless to say we got divorced. So here is my answer. My friend's grandfather does not believe in Japan's existence. Like, if you buy him a ticket to Japan he will think you will land in the ocean. For years I thought that seahorses were made up creatures. Imagine my experience at an aquarium for the first time. Mind blown. I once had to spend half an hour to convince someone that windmills generate energy instead of, as he toughed, create wind when we don't have enough of it in places. He was a university student. My youth minister tried to teach our class that clouds weren't held up by density, but by literally the hand of God. It was the first time I considered that maybe he didn't know what he was talking about. The clitoris. My friend and I were 17 and were in a school that had quite a good sex ed program, and we also did human biology as a subject, so it was a little strange to discover my friend had never heard of the clitoris, and to also deny its existence. I had to spend an entire lunchtime explaining it and convincing them it exists. Also, I'm male and she is female. I hope you showed her how wrong she was. I've had more than one person tell me they don't believe in the laws of physics because if the universe has laws, then why do we need a god? Interestingly, I should mention that this argument was put forth against Newton's Principia when it was published. If the universe was explainable, where was there room for God? Newton was a rather religious man himself, and retorted to these objections that his laws of motion do not comment on the existence of God or not, as that is the realm of faith. Scientists have been repeating Newton ever since, but no one listens to us. I also met a guy once BTW who said he didn't believe in Einstein's relativity. After providing him with evidence how the GPS satellite system would fail within a half hour if you don't take relativity into account, for example, it became clear that it was more he didn't understand what the heck relativity is in the first place. A coworker of mine doesn't believe there are people who don't believe in God. She says they believe, but just don't know yet, or haven't felt the divine inside them. Honestly, I find the "you just don't believe yet" brand of religious believers the least obnoxious, as they believe God will turn up for you in his own time. They don't ever feel the need to try to convert you. I purchased a telescope a few years ago to fulfill a childhood desire and got into astronomy a bit. One of the first things I always look at in a night is Saturn. On several occasions I will have a party on my deck and someone will mention the telescope, so I bring it out. Yes, we are adults and I live in the country, so dark skies, and I just point it at Saturn. On 3 occasions I have had people say, "Holy cow, it's real." That one I write off more as it's a response to "holy frick, I actually saw it," versus not believing in the planet. Years ago in high school, a group of classmates of mine were talking about television shows they had seen in different languages. One claimed to have seen Rugrats, a kid's cartoon, in English, and it sounded so strange. I turned and asked him if he knew that we were speaking English. All of his buddies attacked me, all claiming we were speaking American and that English was a completely different language, not an accent, or even sharing a similar vocabulary. They made it clear they believe that English is incomprehensible to the average American. All jokes aside, I just don't understand this. Even in high school I feel people should know what language they're speaking. I mean, we take English class. I figured that might have been a clue. Fireflies. I met some kids from the Midwest who straight up thought Disney had fabricated them to associate something with a fairy tale. They legitimately didn't believe they were real. My friend doesn't believe there are any onions in onions rings. Even after I peeled one in front of him and showed him the actual onion inside, he was in denial. Atoms. Like, the guy did not believe the coffee table in the room was made up of atoms stuck together. He just thought it was. I don't even know how to begin to process such an idea. My good friend from college doesn't think guys can be bi. Mexico. I crap you not, this guy was laughing and making fun of me because in his mind Mexico didn't exist and was a made up place. My wife doesn't believe that cats should use a special sand in their litter box. She uses regular sand and buys it in those construction stores. At least it's cheaper and it doesn't ruin my pockets. I mean, cats can use regular sand. Back in the day, that's what a lot of people used in litter boxes. It just doesn't really cover the odor well or anything. I know someone whose sister and boyfriend don't believe in the government. I mean, they know that it exists but they refuse to register their kid. They don't file taxes, etc. They're one of those people who never named their kid either. It will get to pick its own name. The taxes thing has a fun way of catching up to you in really big bad way. This girl I knew in high school, conservative Christian town, didn't believe in gay people, not didn't believe they were gay at birth, not didn't believe it wasn't a choice, straight up didn't believe they existed, literally compared them to various mythical creatures. Throughout the years I was forced to be in the same room as her. We had a transfer student, who became one of my best friends, my senior year, who ended up coming out. He dressed up like a unicorn for her Halloween party. I almost died of laughter. I knew a girl that didn't believe in probability. She said that since either something happens or it doesn't, it's always a 50/50 chance. Be right back, I'm going to go buy 2 lottery tickets. Multiple men on OkCupid do not believe that the sun is larger than the earth. There's a profile question that literally asks, which is bigger, the sun or the earth? So many men answer it wrong. One time, I called out a guy who answered it wrong and had messaged me first. His reply, "Oh, I dunno, lol. I don't really think about that stuff." Note, I'm sure some females answer it wrong too, but this is just from my experience as a straight woman. Dated a Southern Baptist girl in high school. Keep in mind, we were some of the top students in our school, all AP classes and so forth. Despite that, the following: didn't believe that light had a finite speed. Discovered this while stargazing. Mentioned offhand how interesting it was that it took light perhaps millions of years to reach us. She rejected this idea out of hand. Carbon dating. She just didn't believe it could work, seeing as the earth was only 6,000 or so years old. No, seriously. That people could live to be older than one of the characters in Book of Numbers. I believe the age in question was in the 100 teens. When I showed her examples of people alive today who are older than that, she reasoned that they were so old they had simply forgotten their age. I had an art teacher who did not believe in airplanes. She said they're too big to fly, and every time someone boarded one they were really hypnotized and tricked into thinking they flew on an airplane and visited a far-off land, and the planes we saw in the sky were all just tiny little plastic models to fool us into thinking large planes are real. I wish more legroom was part of the illusion hypnosis. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.